from Fudan University. And he is a professor of international relations. He was former dean of the School of International Relations and Public Affairs at the Fudan University. Fudan is one of the top universities in China. Professor Ni has many titles, and he has published 150 papers and articles on international relations. And we are very happy to see so many LC students here today. And this evening, he's going to talk about the China peaceful rise and renewed diplomacy. And it is an interesting topic, and many LC students might be like to know what is it. And Professor Ni is going to give us explanation and his interpretation of this topic in details. Now let's welcome Professor Ni.
Ladies and gentlemen, my dear fellow students and fellow colleagues, thank you very much, Professor Lu, for your very kind introduction. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here tonight for this big event. My thanks, first of all, go to the Dean of Confucius Institute here on British side, Dr. Byrne, and also my thanks go to Professor Lu, the Chinese Dean, and my thanks also go to Professor Lu Hong and Professor Chao Li for their kind invitation and careful arrangement. You know, the Confucius Institutes are a great creative practice of Chinese cultural relations with foreign countries. And first, so I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Confucius Institute at London School of Economics here for their great accomplishments made in the past couple of years for the promotion of cultural, academic, and educational exchanges between China and the UK. Today's visit reminded me of my past two visits to London over 10 years ago. Over 10 years ago, I visited London and I had the opportunity to visit here. Though my previous two visits were short, memories always remain fresh. So today I am here again with this renewed friendship. So I'm so pleased, so excited today to have this opportunity to share with you my own experiences and views on the topic of common interest. The title of my tonight's topic is about China's peaceful rise and its new diplomacy. I would like to start by saying a few words about 10 years of cultural revolution in China between 1966 to 1976. I believe that most of you were not born yet by that time. You know, those 10 years turned out to be a disaster for China. Class struggle prevailed all over the country. The economy collapsed. Schools and universities closed down. China suffered for almost 10 years. At that time, I was just a little over, I was in my 20s, early 20s. I experienced that period of time. 10 years of cultural revolution resulted into poverty, isolation, and chaos. I would like to use these three words to describe the situation in China almost by the end of Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. At this critical moment, Deng Xiaoping came up with a grand idea of opening up and reform. That was a start for China's renewal from the Cultural Revolution. During that period of time, I had a couple of opportunities to visit some remote areas in China. For instance, I went to northwestern part of China, Ningxia Autonomous Region, where I saw a lot of poverty. I was shocked. I saw with my own eyes how one peasant's family had only one pair of trousers. One pair of trousers. When mother went out, daughter had to stay home with straw cover her body. I saw it with my own eyes. So you can hardly believe how poor China was right after the Cultural Revolution. How isolated China from the outside world. And China was found in a state of chaos, particularly political chaos. So this is what just now I said, at this critical juncture, Deng Xiaoping was arranged back, and he came up with a grand idea of reform and open policy. By reform, China was step by step able to change the situation in China, shake off poverty. By opening up, China changed the state of isolation. By doing so, China very quickly put an end to political chaos at home. So in this sense, we can see that reform and opening up brought China new hopes for its renewal. And then, China started its reform with focus on economic reform in the countryside, very different from the perestroika and the glasnost of former Soviet Union. They started their perestroika and glasnost with reform, with focus on reform in the cities, right? Political reform and in the cities. China started its economic reform in the countryside, and we succeeded in the first part of reform open policy from late 70s and early 80s to early 90s. In 1992, Deng Xiaoping made an important southern tour. And during his tour, he made very, very important remarks, calling the whole country to shift its focus on reform from a planning economy to market economy. So starting from the early 90s of last century, China started to give up its old, outdated planning economy and started to introduce market economy, of course, we said with Chinese features. And then in early this century, in 2001, China succeeded in joining WTO. That's another landmark of China's reform and open policy, because from that time up, China started to integrate itself with that of the world economy. So since the early this century, you can see China's economy kept developing very, very fast, even faster than we expected. Sometime in 2003, now I still remember, probably in December of 10, the then Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao visited the Harvard University, and I happened to be there because I spent some time at Harvard in early 80s last century. In fact, I was one of the first batch of Chinese scholars at Harvard University doing post-research in international relations. So during my homecoming visit to Harvard, I happened to be there, and I listened to Premier Wen Jiabao's speech on December 10th. And during his speech, Wen Jiabao said to the effect He said, under reform and open policy, China is ready for a peaceful rise. This is the first time that top leaders of China declared to the whole world that China was ready to have a peaceful rise. December 10, 2003. 16 days later, on December 26th, at a forum to mark the 110th anniversary of Mao Zedong's birthday, the then President, Party Secretary Hu Jintao, made an important speech in which Hu Jintao said, China is determined to take the road of peaceful rise. So now generally accepted that China launched a peaceful rise by the end of 2003 and early 2004. So in a sense, that China's peaceful rise was a result, was an outcome of China's reform and open policy of almost over 30 years. Just now I touched upon a little bit China's reform and open policy, how China's reform and open policy developed into peaceful rise in retrospect. When we look back, the evolution of China's reform and open policy and the peaceful rise, I think at least we can reach some preliminary conclusions of China's peaceful rise. So I would like to offer some of my remarks very briefly. Number one, I think China's peaceful rise is the logic development of China's reform and open policy in the past over 30 years. So in the sense that China's peaceful rise is the continuation of China's reform and open policy. China's peaceful rise is not something different. It's not something entirely different from China reform and open policy. It's a natural logic development of China's reform and open policy, which was started in, just I described to you, shortly after the end of Cultural Revolution. The second remark I would like to make is that China's peaceful rise is part of the rise of Asia. China's peaceful rise is not something isolated from Asia or even from the world. China's peaceful rise is a part of the Asian rise, Asian peaceful rise. Once I remember that Deng Xiaoping said, the 21st century might to be a century for Asia, but the precondition for making 21st century to be Asian century is that those countries, like including China, India, and some other important Asian countries, would develop themselves into a medium-sized, medium-level developed country. If China, India, and some other Asian countries could develop to reach that level, the medium-level developed country, then Deng Xiaoping said that might be the time for the new century to be a century for Asia, not before that. So China's peaceful rise is not isolated. While China was developing very fast, China very much hoped that other Asian countries will develop together with us, so that we can make Asia, make the century of next century, not next century, 21st century, be a century for Asia. So China never for a single moment thought that our peaceful rise would be something isolated, right? Our peaceful rise should be and is part of the peaceful rise of Asia. So this is the second remark I would like to make. The third remark I would like is that China's peaceful rise takes time. It's a long process. Although China has been developing very fast in the past over 30 years since the beginning of reform and open policy, we have been meeting a lot of challenges. China's economy has been always beset of a lot of problems and difficulties. We can list some of them. Look at the lack, increasing lack of natural resources in China. Look at the very much serious pollution problem. Right. Look at the unfair, structure, economic structure that we still have, including some financial structure. And look at the widening gap between the rich and the poor, the widening gap between the coast cities, coast areas, and the interior of China. And we have a lot of problems facing. So it takes a long time. It takes probably take another couple of generations before China really reach the goal of a peaceful rise. During that long period, long process, China needs a stable and peaceful environment. Because a peaceful and a stable environment, should definitely will be very important preconditions for China's peaceful rise. Number 4, there are 3 determinant factors about China's peaceful rise. I always tend to, believe that these 3 factors are so decisive. So sometimes I call the 3 principles. Number 1 is China's rise is in peace. Second, China's rise is by peace. Third, China's rise is for peace. So here I use 3 different propositions to describe the 3 very important different principles. When we talk about by in peace, I mean China's rise needs a peaceful environment, just now already mentioned. When I said China's rise is by peace, I mean that China supports any position to solve any regional and international disputes through peaceful means, including our own issue of Taiwan issue. That we are supportive of the idea and the position to solve all domestic, regional, and international disputes through peaceful means. These are very important principles for China's peaceful rise. And thirdly, for peace. The ultimate purpose of China's rise is for peace, for regional peace and for world peace. China's rise is not for something else, just for peace and stability. So China's rise will be in peace, by peace, and for peace. These are the 3 determinant factors, or sometimes called the 3 important principles guiding China's peaceful rise. And these 3 determinant factors or important principles call for peaceful diplomacy for China. So this is the interrelationship between China's peaceful rise and China's peaceful diplomacy. Why China will definitely is practicing or will practice peaceful diplomacy because it is decided by these very important determining factors of China's peaceful rise. China's peaceful rise determines that China will pursue a peaceful diplomacy and further improve our relationship with other countries. Now recently I'm doing a project focused on China's new diplomacy. So this is not final result of my research project. This is only some initial ideas about China's new diplomacy. Now, what is new with China's diplomacy? My preliminary idea is, number one, that China's new diplomacy should be focused on promoting a kind of new big power diplomacy. The first orientation is to promote new big power diplomacy. By big power diplomacy, I mean, first of all, how to handle China-US relationship. Second, China-Russian relationship. Next, China-EU relationship. I think that should include China-British relationship. And fourthly, China-Japanese relationship. I think those four relationships constitute the big power relationships, in my opinion. So how to promote a new type of big power relationship between China on the one hand and the United States, Russia, the EU, and Japan on the other hand. There might be some other big powers, but I think those four big power relationships should be considered as the most important big power relationship. And I think to handle those big power relationships, we have different focuses, different stresses. To handle US-China relationship, I think the focus should be on how to strengthen mutual strategic trust. China and the United States now lack trust very, very much. What we lack is not something else, it's mutual trust. So for China and the United States at this moment, how can we promote mutual trust has become the most important, the key and most important problem or issue for these two big powers. Please let me put it aside for a moment, and we'll come back again after I touch upon the four orientations for Chinese new diplomacy. Second, how to handle China-Russian relationship. I think the focus should be on how to strengthen mutual strategic complementarity. China and Russia should be more complementary to each other, but the implications for mutual complementarity is pretty far away from being explored, far from being developed. So I have much room for the further complementarity between China and Russia. As to China-EU relationship, I think the focus should be on how to strengthen mutual strategic interaction. China should learn how to handle its relation with the EU, not only bilaterally, but multilaterally. So how to handle a relation with EU as a whole, and how to handle its relationship with each member of the EU. Now it's 28 members of the EU. How to handle its relation with each of you. For instance, how to handle a relation with UK. I think should be one of the very important issues in this regard. As we all know that since early last year, our mutual relationship has been frozen for some period of time, right? Now recently we feel that our mutual relationship is being warmed up. So how to handle and make our relationship to be further improved and strengthened, that's a big problem. Now what's the focus for China-Japan relationship? The focus should be on how to get back the idea of how to hold on to the bottom line of mutual strategic benefit. You know, China-Japan relationship has been in trouble. Like even on the verge of collapse because of little rocky uninhabited island called the Diaoyu Island. Sometimes you think whether it's worth doing that, right? But this is a fact that China and Japan are now very much trouble with each other over that little island. So how to tidal over the Diaoyu crisis for China and Japan is very important. Because in 2008, our two countries reached a consensus to establish a mutual benefit relationship, whether or not our two countries should hold on to this bottom line. The good news is that even now, neither of Japan or China has ever declared that it has to give up the bottom line. So that means two sides, even now, have been holding on to this bottom line. This is good news. The bad news is that we're still in trouble, deep trouble, over that little island. So it probably will take time for us to tidal over this crisis and really come back to the bottom line of keeping this called the mutual benefit relationship. So this is a general idea of my general idea about the new big power relationship in China and other big powers. The second orientation for China's new diplomacy is how to promote new peripheral diplomacy. That's how to handle and even promote China's relationship with neighboring countries. In the past few years, the peripheral situation for China has been very serious. China has made a lot of urgent problems, particularly in its handling of territorial disputes, not only between China and Japan, but also between China and other countries centering the South China Sea issues, between China and Vietnam, between China and the Philippines, right? And even between China and India, and between China and Myanmar. China now is facing a very serious situation of handling its peripheral relationship with some of the ASEAN countries and some of the countries in Northeast Asia and even some in South Asia. So how to handle this relationship? And of course, the focus should be the handling of territorial disputes. I think this is the first and foremost important issue between the two sides. And beyond that, we have two or three other more issues in this regard. For instance, how to handle the proliferation issue. The Korean nuclear crisis occurred in 2002. 11 years had passed. Although we have a lot of breakups, but we haven't got any breakthrough. This issue is still in the deadlock, right? And SPT, SPT stands for Six Party Talks. This year, It's the 10th year, the 10 years since the start of SPT. But now SPT has been suspended for more than 4 years, and we still have not seen any hope of its resumption. I think to resume six-part SPT is one of the most urgent issues for China and other countries concerned, because we don't want to see the proliferation of nuclear weapons on Korean Peninsula. And between India and Pakistan, they have some problems. Besides the Kashmir issue, both of the countries now have nuclear weapons. And both of the two countries refuse to participate in NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. So China also facing this problem, right? How to persuade India and Pakistan to stop their nuclear programs. It's very hard now. I think it's too late now, but this is the realistic issue for them. But how to persuade the country to participate in NPT while having them handle their Kashmir issue properly. You see, in a peripheral area, we're not only facing territorial disputes issue, but also proliferation issue. So we need new ideas to handle all these issues. Because so far, countries concerned have found themselves in a security dilemma. Security dilemma. We haven't got out of security dilemma yet. We need to think something new to get out of this security dilemma and to find some new pattern so that we can handle all those issues in a more proper, in a more mature way. So all these things that we should do in order to handle our peripheral diplomacy much better. Now next, I think as for China's new diplomacy, we have to mention this. That is how to promote a kind of new multilateral diplomacy. For a long time, China has been very accustomed to bilateral diplomacy. China, for a period, was very good, very accustomed. In fact, very accustomed to, very skillful at handling bilateral diplomacy, but not a multilateral diplomacy. Now it's a high time for China to learn how to handle multilateral diplomacy. Now recently I suggested to some people from our government, I think that we should give much more attention to China's active participation in the following multilateral platforms or stages, or we call it regimes, multiple lateral regimes. Number one is G20. Number two is the BRICS. BRICS, 5 countries of the BRICS. Golden BRICS, 5 countries. China, Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa. But China should contribute more for this very important emerging multilateral regime in regional and international affairs. And the next is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. China should play a more important active role in SCO. And next, China should take a more and more positive and constructive role in United Nations and its sub-institutions. Of course, China has been played a very important role in the United Nations as a sub-institutions, but far from enough. China should play a very important role together with other countries to push ahead with United Nations reform, so that let United Nations play more leading role in handling regional and global issues now we are facing. Not always let other, particularly the only superpower to handle all those urgent regional and international issues. Of course, we welcome the United States, the only superpower in the world, to play a dual role in handling regional and global issues. But first of all, we think that the United Nations should take the leading role, not only superpower, right? So China, I think, a lot of things to do in this regard. And finally, I would like that China should promote a kind of new people-to-people, cultural diplomacy. And the Confucius Institution is exactly, something under these circumstances expected to play a more and more important role. So this is why at the beginning of my speech I said that the Confucius Institution has been a creative practice to promote people-to-people, culture-to-cultural exchanges. And we are so pleased to see more and more Confucius institutions have been set up all over the world for this purpose. So, and I'm always excited, so we're very excited to be involved somehow in this great practice of Confucius Institutes. And the purpose and mission of this time is to meet people and the faculty of various Confucius Institutes in UK, so that I can not only can learn something, but I'm thinking of people, scholars like me, can not only learn something, but also getting more involved, so that we can also contribute to the further development of the Confucius Institutes in this regard. And recently I was invited to participate in the 3rd Global Forum of Thinking Tanks in Beijing. And suddenly I found that thinking tanks have been playing such an important role in promoting public diplomacy in other countries. So then, and in May this year, my former students in helped set up, of course, that is very small, thinking tank China in my name, called the Shanghai Shixiong Institute for International Exchanges. So now I also have my platform, and although it's very small, but I'm determined to make it the big thinking tanks in China to promote the scholar-to-scholar, people-to-people relationship between China and other countries. And already I put emphasis on the exchange relationship between China and the United States. Through this trip, I might include China and UK, people-to-people, scholar-to-scholar relationship. China now has set up numerous sister cities and sister states and provinces between China and the United States. As I can remember, now it's over 250. I don't know how many for Chinese cities and provinces and British cities and you call the counties right here, also on the sister-to-sister cities basis. And China has sent increasing students abroad to study, not only to the United States but in UK. So I think this is also a very important aspect for China to do in order to promote people-to-people, culture-to-culture, education-to-education exchange. So I think China's new diplomacy should include the above-mentioned four orientations: new big power diplomacy, new peripheral diplomacy, new multilateral diplomacy, and new people-to-people, culture-to-culture diplomacy. I thought we still have some time, so let me add a few words about China and the U.S. relations and China-UK relations to wrap up my speech, and then I welcome your comments and questions. Just as I mentioned that the focus between China and the United States now is mutual strategic trust. What China and the United States lack is not something else but mutual trust. Somebody coined a term for this issue, for the deficit of trust. We find a deficit of trust between China and the United States. China and the United States established its diplomatic relations in 1979. So it has been 38 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two great nations. My first visit to Harvard University was 1980. So I experienced most of the big events of our mutual relationship. So on the one hand, I think China and the United States have made historical progress in promoting its mutual relationship. This is a fact. Right? Just look at the mutual official visits, the people-to-people visits between two countries, the momentum for cooperation in different fields in U.S.-China relationship. Look at how many strategic dialogues and consultations between China and the United States. According to recent statistics, now there are over 90 dialogues. Most of them are dialogues of strategic meaning, strategic significance. Over 90. So you can see, during the past over 34 years, China and U.S. relationship has been always keeping forward motion, despite ups and downs, turns and twists. But on the other hand, we will see the lack of trust, particularly since the beginning of this century. After September 11, the United States has been experiencing an important period of its strategic readjustment, shifting its focus of global strategy from Europe to Middle East, and then from Middle East to Asia. The United States almost completed its new readjustment of its strategic focus from Europe to Asia by the year of 2010. At the same time, China started also a very important historical period. We call it the period of strategic opportunities. So the period of strategic readjustment for the United States, the historical period of strategic opportunities for China, almost stopped at the same time. The two periods moved on simultaneously without much trouble at the beginning. But eventually these two periods collided. They met and collided with each other in the year of 2010. When the United States completed its shifting Asia, they called pivoting Asia, P-I-V-O-T, pivoting Asia in 2010, while China formally announced that China had surpassed Germany and Japan in terms of its GDP, exactly in the year of 2010. So China periods of historical opportunities and the US is period of strategic readjustments eventually collided in the year of 2010. Unfortunately, this collision between China and the United States resulted into a new round of mistrust against each other. China started to doubt what's the intention of U.S. pivoting Asia, whether or not it was directed against China, it will contain China, or whether it will encircle China. On the other hand, the United States started to suspect China. What's the intention of China's rapid peaceful rise? Right? It had surpassed that of Germany and Japan, and almost at the same time, Beijing kept saying that in about 2 to 3 years, China will be able to surpass that of the United States and become #1 economy in the world. That really frightened the United States. So the United States started to doubt what's the intention of China's peaceful rise, whether it will challenge the United States, whether it will pose a new threat to the United States, or even China sooner or later will replace the United States as the leading country, at least in the Asian Pacific area. This is something that the United States at least to see. The United States does not want to see that some rising power threatening the United States and even replacing the United States. So my friends, my fellow students and fellow colleagues, from 2010, a growing strategic suspicion has been appearing, has been taking shape, unfortunately, in China and in the United States. So how to overcome this growing mistrust between our two countries? That's the problem. That's the focus for a kind of new diplomacy between China and the United States. So this is why Hu Jintao visited the United States in 2011. Xi Jinping, in capacity of Vice President, visited the United States in February of 2012, last year. You know, on what day? Interesting enough, Xi Jinping visited the United States on February 14th, Valentine's Day. So his visit, was so successful and helped a great deal to hold on this suspicion. And in June this year, Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Obama met with each other again at the Sunnyland in California, and that meeting turned out to be another big success, and both sides reached a new consensus to develop our mutual relationship into a new type relationship between China and the United States, in the spirit of no clash, no confrontation, mutual respect, cooperation, and win-win results. You know, those are the new consensus reached by China and the United States. So now, although the suspicion, I think, is still lingering there, but both sides has been taking active measures to overcome this growing suspicion. We hope that China and the United States can resume and recover the necessary trust between the two countries, so that China and the United States will be able to build up a new diplomacy, a new big power relationship between the two countries. And as to China and the UK relationship, just as I said, during the past over 1 year, we had some difficulty, we had a difficult time, but now it's all right. Recently, 3 ministers of UK visited China. The Minister of Energy and Climate Change, the Minister of Finance, no, Treasury, we call it Treasury? Treasury, right? And the Mayor of London. And the Chinese media gave much coverage of their visits. I bought some Philippine newspapers showing how the London mayor, riding bicycle in Beijing, or in Shanghai, or in Beijing, and how he took subway in Beijing, and he said, "Oh, how cheap it is." And how he rode bicycle. I believe in the Byrne area of Shanghai, it's a newly made bicycle, unfolded bicycle. I think definitely will have a much promising market in China. So that and Minister of Treasury George Osborne gave a speech at Beijing University, and the Minister of Energy visited Fudan University, my university. So they were very well received, and the public and the media spoke very highly of the recent important visits by ministers from Mayor of London from UK, and said that that's a great deal to promote our mutual relationship. I've been just in London for two days, and really I very much impressed by the warmth and friendship between two countries. I'm still very much impressed by the deep-rooted culture of UK, the sustainable dynamics of London, and academic vitality of the London School of Economics. So I'm very excited to be here, and thank you very much for attention. I'll stop here and
I think it's a very informative talk, and from a Chinese scholar's perspective, probably we can get a general picture about China's peaceful rise. I still remember Professor Ni mentioned China's rise of peace, by peace, for the peace. And I remember that, and we'll never forget. And I think probably you have some questions, and since Professor Ni is going to catch a train at 9, and it would be better that we have 5 questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very nice talk. I'm Amelia. It's very nice to hear that China keeps its rise in peace, by peace, and for peace. But we must take a stock of things also. We must, one wonders how predictable this might be. Could one imagine a next regime changing this course of action when the Chinese government, China is governed by a small number of, a quarter of people. It is not a democracy, and such governments are very unpredictable. And so, and you pointed out how China changed its course from Cultural Revolution and then back to Cultural Revolution to glass course and all that kind of openness. So, would this not be a reasonable doubt that China, which is run by a quarter of people, can change its course and it's unpredictable? So, if your what you call your thesis to be more convincing, more persuasive, more convincing, China has to show some effort to develop its democracy. Democracy tend to be more predictable, and if China is democratic, we will have more faith in China's a peaceful rise. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could you say what moves are you making towards building democracy, if you like?
Thank you very much. In fact, I learned from your question, right? Because your question is focused on one point, that how we can make China's peaceful rise more predictable, China's future more predictable. Right? You're right. I think you mentioned the one determining factor, that is will China become more democratic, because democracy usually is more predictable. Right? This is your opinion. I entirely agree with you. In my talk just now, I mentioned that China started its economic reform in the countryside, and then it's shifting to cities, and then it moved to its political reform. In China, political reform has been very slow. This is the fact. Because it's easily understood. You know, when we had economic reform, just like a patient, just like a surgeon, making operations on others. When we started political reform, this is just like a surgeon making an operation on himself. It's difficult, painful, and difficult. So it is fully understood that why China's political reform has been so slow, taking into consideration China's one-party political system. So whether or not, under these political circumstances, can China, move on with its political reform? My answer is right. It can. It's possible. It could be slow, but it's possible. One of the turning points was when President Hu Jintao visited the United States in 2006. He wrapped up his visit at Yale University. He gave a speech there, and he emphasized that without democratization, there will be no China's modernization. Yes, I agree. You and I and others support this position. That's wonderful. President Hu Jintao said so, emphasized that if there's no democratization, there will be no modernization for China. This is the determination of the top leadership of China by that time. Now how about our new top leadership headed by Xi Jinping? My impression is that Xi Jinping will continue, although it is a slow process. People at my age, when we call back the 10 years of Cultural Revolution, no human rights, no freedom, no democracy at all during 10 years of Cultural Revolution. Compared to the 10 years of Cultural Revolution, the difference is just like a day and a night now, right? But it takes more time to do so. And the second point I will mention is that we should not only take democracy as into consideration for whether or not China's future will be predictable. We have one more important factor, that is, we should take into consideration the change of our times. The main trends, main tendencies of the contemporary new era since the end of the collapse of Soviet Union, the end of Cold War, has been peace, development, and cooperation. And democratization of international relations has been one of the irresistible tendencies in the world. China now is more and more integrated itself into the world. So China will go with the tide, not against the tide. I believe that our top leadership now or in the future will be aware that if we go against the tide, then we should have no way out. We should go with the tide. What is the new tendency of tide of our times? Peace, development, cooperation, and democracy. democracy or international relations. So this is why I have been always talking to my American friends, because I've been in the United States more frequent than to the UK. I've been to the United States more than 80 times. So I have a lot of American friends. I kept telling them, I think domestically, maybe your society is more democratic. But internationally, the United States seems very less democratic. The United States, playing the role of hegemony, hegemonic policy, always to bully other countries, always, do something beyond United Nations. The United States is what we call the superpower and practices the hegemonism, right? Not democratic internationally, though it is democratic at home, but not democratic abroad. And in China, it seems a different situation, different picture. Domestically, we might not be that democratic, but internationally, China is very much. So I tell my American friend that China and I should learn from each other. So they have two society more democratic and international society also democratic at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a great lecture. I just wanted to say that you've mentioned China's relationship with the US, the EU, and its other neighbours. Can you provide any comments on China's relationship with the African nations?
I missed your last phrase. The relationship between China and?
On China's relationship with the African nations.
African. My goodness. You caught over my weakness. Must be. In the other way here, I'm thinking of what's new with China's diplomacy. I mentioned big power, I mentioned peripheral, I mentioned the multilateral, I mentioned the public diplomacy and so on and so forth. Really, I want to add one more. That is a new third world country diplomacy. Definitely that will include Africa and Latin America. But here I think when I saw the multilateral relationship, I think the relationship between China and African countries should be included in that regard, under that heading of multilateral relationship. Just I mentioned the BRICS, China-BRICS relationship. BRICS, of course, includes South Africa. Yes, African countries are great friends of China. In 1971, it was African friends who helped China in the United Nations in passing a resolution to resume China's legitimate seat in the United Nations. So Mao Zedong once said, we should never forget what African friends helped us in 1971 when China resumed our United Nations seat. So it is our duty to help African countries in their economic development. And it is our goal to further promote our relationship with other countries. And it so happened that last week in Shanghai, I was invited to a reception. And on the occasion, I met with over 20 African ambassadors to China. I still keep their name cards. I feel so good, to get to know so many African ambassadors and consuls general in Beijing and Shanghai that all gathered in Shanghai, and we'll talk about the future relationship between China and African countries. So on the whole, I think China's relation with Africa is good. Maybe we'll have some problems, but on the whole, it's good. Because once I was invited to give a series of lectures in Germany, and in my class there were about 20 graduate students coming from 8 different countries, and 5 students came from Africa. from time to time, sometimes they challenge me about China's aid programs in Africa. Some of the programs were not perfect. And some, I think, even they give me some examples how we practice, child labor there, to explore some natural resources there at very unfair conditions and so on and so forth. So I think definitely there are some problems, but our government now has paid more and more attention to correct those problems, and we want to further promote our relation with African countries. Do you know, every 2 years that there are summit meetings between China and African countries, and once every 2 years. And we invited over 50 different African countries' leaders together in Beijing and talk about the future programs. And China, every time the Chinese government will come up with some new projects and programs to promote the cooperation and exchanges between China and African countries. So you're right. The next time I think of to add one more aspect of China's new diplomacy to promote the relationship with other third world countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your lecture, Professor. I've got a question. You mentioned that natural resources in China are scarce, they are limited. Yeah. China's got a lot of money, go to Africa, other nations, other continents you buy. But one of your neighbors, Russia, which is quite big, huge,
are you from Russia?
Polish.
Polish.
And uninhabited areas of Siberia, there's a lot of Chinese people that go and live there, work, make businesses, establish businesses. Don't you think that in about, say, 10, 15 years' time, in far eastern areas of Russia, there could be a problem when these people realize, look, we are Chinese, but we don't live in China, let's join our own country. What do you think about it? Could this be a problem?
Just I mentioned China-Russian relationship, and the focus is on to strengthen the mutual strategic complementarity. Right, complementarity. I've been to Russia. I've been to Moscow and Pittsburgh, and I met with a lot of Russian people, business people, scholars, and I have an impression that there are great potentials for China and Russia to develop some mutual cooperation in different fields. Now the weakness of our mutual relationship is that politically we have reached a very high level. Economically, we're still at a very low level. For instance, last year's figure show that the trade volume between China and Russia was just something like $60 billion. 60. And in 2 or 3 years, they will probably be able to reach $100 billion between China and Russia. And so the potentials, still will be still far from being fully developed or explored. And as to the eastern part of Russia, in the Siberia, I think probably is the most important part of potential between China and Russia to develop in the next 5 to 10 years. I agree with it. In the next 10 years, probably one of the focuses between China and Russian economic trade relationship will be focused on the Asian part of Russia, including Siberia, the development of Siberia. In 2 years, the EPIC meeting was held in Siberia, and also that will give a great impetus to the economic and trade relationship in China and the United States. From 40 billion to 6 billion, that was a great leap, but still not enough. Do you know how much trade volume between China and the UK over 10 years ago, 11 years ago, only 30was 3 billion, right? 3 billion. Now it's 30 billion. And I mean, over 30 billion now. And according to China's new Premier Li Keqiang and the British Minister of Finance office during the meeting recently in Beijing, that in 2 or 3 years, China-UK trade volume probably will rise up to something like 60, 70, and then in 2 years it will be reaching to $100 billion between China and the UK. So let's back to China-Russia relationship, the big potentials. This once again proved that the focus between China and Russia should be how to promote the mutual strategic complementarity. That's the key and the focus for China and Russian relationship, particularly economic trade relationship in the future. Thank you very much.
As we have rather limited time, we'll try to get the last question.
Right.
Gentleman there.
Do you think that China can accept the current status quo with America in the South China Sea and Southeast Asia? With the America being able to almost have a naval stranglehold over oil imports and trade into China, and also being able to enter into its exclusive economic zone whenever it likes. Do you think China can accept this? And if it's looking to change it, how can it do that peacefully? Especially including the other South China Sea nations.
Just I also touch upon the U.S.-China relationship in this regard. In recent years, the clash between China and the United States was somehow focused on the clash between core national interests. Have you ever heard the concept, the core national interests? The core national, of course, is focused on sovereignty and territorial integrity. So China always regards that our problem with the United States over the South China Sea issue is an issue which touches upon the core national interests. So for China cannot make much concession in this route, because we think that this is China's core national interests. And the United States has been challenging China's core national interests. Before 2010, the United States had been emphasizing or had been saying that on the one hand, the United States took no stand, no position to whatever this island or that area in South China Sea belong to China or belong to Vietnam, belong to the Philippines. For the disputes between China and Vietnam, China and the Philippines, and other Asian countries, the United States said, we did not take any position. It's your problem. Secondly, the United States said, we were not involved. We are not involved. We have not been involved. We will not be involved in any territorial disputes in South China Sea between China and other countries concerned. And we tend to believe that the United States had been doing so before 2010. But after 2010, when the United States was busy with its pivoting Asia, to be frank, that the United States started changing its position. I don't think that from 2010, the United States still held on the position of not getting involved in this area. The United States started getting involved in disputes between China and Vietnam, between China and the Philippines and other countries. United States appeared very much supportive to Vietnam for its illegal requests, illegal occupations of some of the islands, which historically belonging to China. And the United States decided to support the Philippines, such a tiny country, no navy, no force, no air force, to obviously make some troubles against China, and claiming that the little Hualien Island belonging to the Philippines. That's ridiculous, And the United States decided to support the Philippines. So this is the essence. And furthermore, China and the United States had some differences over the navigation freedom. The United States that we now, our negative navigation freedom now has been very much obstructed by China. We find China always in the way for free navigation. So this is why the former State Secretary Hillary Clinton, on one of the ARF meeting, ASEAN Regional Forum, attacked Chinese government for its obstacles to the free navigation of the United States in South China Sea. So from 2010, China and the United States has been arguing over those South China Sea issues. So it's very fortunate that whether China can accept the U.S. proposals or position, I think this is not the right time for China to. I don't think China can accept the U.S. proposal or position at this moment.
So do you think China should play the waiting game until they're even stronger?
So China will
deal with it.
During the process of building up a new diplomacy, new big power relationship, both sides will sit down and will find a way out for that. And recently, our new foreign minister Wang Yi, during his first trip to the United States, he made a speech at the Brookings Institution. And he suggests that the building up of new big power relationship between China and the United States should start with Asian issues. And he listed 4 Asian issues to test U.S.-China new relationship. The first issue is the issue of Afghanistan. By the end of next year, when U.S. troops are pulled out from Afghanistan, and how China and the United States can cooperate in maintaining the stability, security of Afghanistan in the post-financial era and in the era of anti-international terrorism era. So how China and the United States can cooperate after U.S. pulls out its troops from Afghanistan. So this is the first issue. The second issue is South China Sea. The third issue is Diaoyu Island between China and Japan. And the fourth issue is the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue between China and South Korea. EPRK, right? How China can do something new to persuade North Korea to come back to the SPT for a new solution, for the final solution for the crisis of the Korean Peninsula. So our new foreign minister listed 4 issues. And as I can feel that the United States responded very positively. So I believe that under the structure of over 90 dialogues and one working team between China and the United States will start their job to sit down and talk and how to minimize our differences and seek more commonalities and then find some new ideas and new approaches to calm down the situation there and to deal with those crises in a proper and a mature way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to say that we don't have time for the questions. And anyway, we'd like to thank you very much for your questions. And finally, I'd like to invite you to join me to give our thanks to Professor Ni once again.